Hi, Questers. Welcome to What Happened to Us podcast with me, your host, Michaela Sanders. And on this platform, we're going to discuss Black true crime cases, exploring told and untold cases, forgotten and popular cases with us as both victims and perpetrators, because it go both ways. We'll also talk about the evolution of Black culture and its continuous influence on society in America and globally, all while answering the question, what happened to us? Happy Valentine's Day. Valentine's Day is a time to celebrate love, but it should also serve as a reminder of the importance of choosing the right partner. Love can be beautiful, uplifting, and life-changing, really, but when the wrong choices are made, it can turn into manipulation, destruction, and even tragedy. True crime history is filled with killer couples, lovers who, instead of building a healthy life together, spiral into violence and crime, proving that who you choose to love can shape your destiny. Killer couples are rare. Most violent sexual predators act alone, but they have a common dynamic, and that's usually a dominant one and a weaker, more submissive partner. Understanding the early lives of Alton Coleman and Debra Brown offers insight as to how they became one of the most infamous killer couples in American history. Their backgrounds, though different, shaped the paths that led them together and ultimately to their horrific crime spree. Alton Coleman was born on November 6, 1955 in Waukegan, Illinois. His mother worked 3 jobs and he lived with his 73-year-old grandmother. From an early age, he grew up outside and displayed signs of deviant and criminal behavior. He had a long history of juvenile delinquency, including theft and violent outbursts. However, it was his obsession with sexual violence that truly defined his path. He had bedwetting problems, no friends, and childhood peers remember him being the butt of everybody's jokes. They bullied and laughed at him, calling him pissy and shitty. His grandma was a voodoo queen, and there were often reports of slaying animals and other rituals she performed, as there were lots of men in and out the house. In killer couples, males were exposed to sex at a young age, prematurely, starting their interest in sex so young. Coleman was well known to Illinois law enforcement, having been charged with 6 sex crimes 6 times between 1973 and 1983. Mind you, he was doing all this at the ripe age of 17. He spent most of his 20s harassing and sexually assaulting women and other people. 2 out of those 6 cases were dismissed. 2, he pled guilty to lesser charges and was acquitted for the other 2. His victims included women and younger girls. He had even been arrested for the sexual assault of his niece. Coleman was diagnosed with mixed personality disorder with probable antisocial and narcissistic and obsessive features, with additional diagnosis of epileptic spasms, psychosis, and borderline personality disorder. Debra Brown was born on November 11, 1962 in Waukegan as well. She is one of 11 children, and like Coleman, Brown grew up in an abusive environment. She experienced physical and emotional abuse within her home and grew up known to be shy and timid. She was also borderline intellectually disabled, suffering head trauma as a child, and was diagnosed with dependent personality disorder by a psychiatrist. In 1983, while Alton was out wreaking havoc, Debra was living her own life, engaged to a man who, by all accounts, treated her with care. He was an ordinary, law-abiding man, and the pair lived in a seemingly stable, normal life. However, that year, she met Alton Brown and became infatuated with him. He exerted psychological control over her, and she became quickly devoted to him, following his lead in all things, including his violent impulses. She had left her fiance It's already off to a bad start. She left her fiance. Okay. She left her fiance, upcoming marriage, and her family within months of meeting him and moved in with Alton very shortly afterwards. During this time, the pair's bond strengthened and their relationship went to a whole nother level. Debra's complex background, personality, and intellectual disadvantage contributed to her passive nature and her willingness to submit to stronger personalities. Coleman and Brown committed their first murder when they killed 9-year-old Vernita Wheat. After Coleman had befriended her mother, Juanita Wheat, he abducted Vernita and took her to Waukegan on May 29, 1984. Vernita's badly decomposed body was discovered on June 19th in an abandoned building 4 blocks away from the apartment Coleman's grandmother lived in. It was determined she had been raped and the cause of death was ligature strangulation. That's basically strangling somebody with a rope-like object or a rope by tying it around their neck. And on May 31st, Coleman befriended Robert Carpenter in Waukegan and spent the night at his home. The next day, he borrowed Carpenter's car. That's why you don't let nobody borrow your car. He borrowed his car and he never returned. During this time, he was scheduled to go on trial in Illinois on charges stemming from the rape of a 14-year-old girl when he had fled and began his killing spree. And y'all, pardon me if I'm saying the names of these cities wrong. I'm so sorry if it's your hometown. Or you just so happen to know the city. I'm so truly sorry. I'm trying my best. Charge it to not my heart. Because it's Valentine's Day. Also, in June 1984, Coleman and Brown encountered 2 young girls in Gary, Indiana. 9-year-old Annie Turks and her niece, 7-year-old Tamika Turks. The couple sexually assaulted the 2 children. Annie survived the violent attack, but unfortunately, Tamika did not. Her partially decomposed body was discovered on June 19th. The same day, Donna Williams, a 25-year-old woman from Gary, disappeared. They stole her car and traveled 4 hours away across state lines, 293 miles to Detroit, Michigan. And I'm not gonna lie, at this point, they in Michigan, this is really their 3rd, or is it their 4th? This is the 4th state at this point. They done been up and through Illinois, they done been up and through Wisconsin, they done been up and through Indiana, now they making their way to Michigan. They definitely terrorized the Midwest in the 80s, and this only the beginning. The couple had kidnapped, raped, and killed Donna by ligature strangulation with a pair of pantyhose. On July 11th, her decomposed body was discovered about half a mile from where her car was found. On June 28th, Coleman and Brown entered the home of Palmer Jones and his wife Marjorie of Dearborn Heights, Michigan, who they severely beat. And this is a suburb just like 20 minutes outside of Detroit. So they had really been in the same area since they had left Indiana for weeks now. And Coleman ripped their telephone out of the wall before stealing their money in their car. So they're increasingly getting more violent and increasingly getting more confident in what they're doing. At this point, investigators are growing frustrated as they feel like they're always a step behind the 2. I shared that the victims are found decomposing because this means that the police are repeatedly days and weeks behind Alton and Debra. Time is critical, especially if you call yourself trying to catch active serial killers on the run. Amen? Police departments are trying to cooperate across state lines and relay information, which they're running into complications. It's resulting in the delay of action or confusion in information. They assault people, it get reported, but before the police could react or even do something about it or even put the connection together, they were gone into the next place. On July 5th, Coleman and Brown arrived in Toledo, Ohio, their fifth city, where Coleman befriended Virginia Temple, the mother of several children, at church. She invited them to spend the night and have dinner with them. She even cut Coleman's hair that night. After Temple stopped communicating with her relatives, police entered her home and found her young children alone and frightened. Temple and her eldest child, 9-year-old Rochelle, had been sexually assaulted and strangled to death and left in a crawl space. Virginia's bracelet was later found under the body of another victim in another city, which is how they connected the stream of murders eventually. Now, if you ask me, this was a na boo boo, you can't catch me type of thing that they was trying to like play with the investigators, and the investigators are trailing behind them, but it always seems like they're a day late and a dollar short. The couple increasingly becomes more confident in their crimes. They're taunting them. They taunting the police like, they come and get me, but you can't. And the hunt was still on though. Like, so they're basically playing cat and mouse at this point. And they've been on the run for almost 2 months. And I'm not sure what their end goal was or what their plan was really. I'm not sure what the point of this was. But every crime committed was opportunistic. And doing these acts made them feel like somebody, I don't know who they was feeling like. But it seemed like they was enjoying themselves. On the same morning as the Temple murders, Coleman and Brown entered the home of Frank and Dorothy Duvendak in Toledo as well. They bounded them with electrical cords. The couple stole the Duvendaks' money and their car, and again, Mrs. Duvendak's stolen watch was later found under another victim in another crime. Later that day, Coleman and Brown visited the Dayton home of Reverend Miller Gay and his wife, Catherine. The two stayed at the Gays and accompanied them to their religious service that Sunday, and on July 9th, the next day, so that Monday, the Gays dropped the couple off in downtown Cincinnati, about an hour down south. Now, if you're wondering how in the world is he befriending so many women and traveling around undetected and able to just get close to so many people so fast, but you have to understand he was a considerably good-looking man for the time period, and he had a mouth slicker than oil. He could lure them victims in, and it allowed them to feel at ease and let their guard down around him. He offered candy and treats to the kids. He could talk his way into the home by just meeting people off the street and discuss religion, politics, or whatever gauged their interest. He's very straightforward. He was very well spoken and calm. Coleman was known for his charm. He could be persuasive and manipulative. This ability played a very crucial role in luring his victims and also in controlling Debra. I mean, she was mesmerized by him. The way they operated was Brown found the opportunity and opened the door for Coleman, and he walked through it. One would attack and the other one would pounce. They knew each other's strengths, so this method proved to work for them. And then you got to remember that this is the 80s. People wanted to trust other people, and it wasn't uncommon to open up your home to someone who seemed genuine and just seemed like they just needed a hand. On July 12th, Tawny Story, a 15-year-old girl who lived in Cincinnati's Over the Rhine neighborhood, disappeared. Her body was discovered 8 days later. A bracelet that had been stolen from the Temples, remember Virginia's bracelet, was found under Story's body. On the day of Story's disappearance, the FBI added Coleman to the 10 most wanted list as a special edition, the 11th most wanted. Coleman and Brown bicycled into Norwood. This is a suburb of Cincinnati, on July 13th at 9:30 a.m. When they got there, they had been on the run for 45 days or 44 days. They needed a car to get out of town and devised a plan to get one. It's no way America's Most Wanted is finna be biking around the streets. Like, it's just no way. And Harry Walter, 45, was home on vacation from his job as a construction worker. Marlene, his wife, 44, was a Sunday school teacher, a part-time librarian, and a mother of three. Their daughter, 19-year-old Sherry, lived with them, but she wasn't home at the time. That morning, the Walters posted an ad to sell their camper, and Coleman and Brown came across this, looking for, an upgrade from their bikes and all. They arrived for inquiry and asked to look at the camper the Walters had for sale in their driveway. Neighbors said that Coleman and Brown spent hours at the Walters' home, chatting and drinking coffee on the porch. Eventually, Harry and Marlene invited them inside. When Harry went upstairs to find the title to the camper, Coleman beat his wife over the head with a candlestick, hitting her more than 24 times, crashing her skull and killing her. When Harry returned, Coleman beat him in the head too, knocking him out. The candlestick drove a sliver of his skull into his brain, causing some brain damage. He was also stabbed in the abdomen. Coleman and Brown bound their hands and feet together and left them for dead, but Harry survived. Sherry came home about 3:45 p.m. hours later and found her parents covered in blood at the bottom of the basement stairs. Shards of a broken soda bottle, which kept Coleman's fingerprints, were found in the Walters' living room, and bloody prints made by the 2 pairs of shoes were found in the basement. The Walters' red Plymouth Reliant, money, jewelry, and shoes were stolen. 2 bicycles, clothes, and shoes not belonging to the Walters had been left behind. Within 24 hours of the attack, police and the FBI had matched fingerprints at the Walters' house with Coleman's, and a frantic search was on. Police found the red Plymouth Reliant 2 days later in a field in Lexington, Kentucky. 2 days later, the Plymouth was found abandoned in Kentucky, where Coleman and Brown had kidnapped Olin Carmichael Jr., a college professor from Williamsburg, and drove back to Ohio with Carmichael locked in the trunk of his own car. On July 17th, they abandoned his stolen vehicle in Dayton, and Carmichael, who was still locked in the trunk, was rescued by authorities. Coleman and Brown returned to the home of the Gays, remember Pastor and his wife, and they had guns in their hand instead of Bibles this time. Reverend Gay, who recognized Coleman now as a wanted fugitive, asked, "Why are you doing us like that?" Like, he wanted to know, why are you coming back here, and why you didn't tell us what you was up to, and then why did you have us drop you off an hour away and you killed the little girl? So Pastor just trying to get answers from him, and Coleman tells him, "I'm not going to kill you. We generally kill them where we go." Coleman and Brown took their car and headed back towards Evanston, Illinois. Along the way, they stole another car in Indianapolis and killed its owner, Eugene Scott. 3 days later, on July 20th, Coleman and Brown were arrested in Evanston. As they walked westward across an intersection, they passed immediately in front of a motorist who was from Coleman's neighborhood in Waukegan. The motorist drove north to a gas station and notified the police from a payphone. I ain't gonna lie, when I saw that part, it put it into perspective what time this story took place. Because when I saw a payphone, I was like, oh my God. I had to dig in my memory bank to remember what they looked like. The couple were soon spotted sitting on a portable bleacher in an empty Mason Park. As 2 police sergeants approached Coleman, Brown was observed walking away toward the rear of the park, trying to make a little escape. 2 of the officers stopped Brown as she tried to exit the park, searched her, and found a gun in her purse. The pair were taken into custody without incident and transported to the Evanston police station, where they both were identified by their fingerprints. As Coleman was strip searched, a steak knife was found between 2 pairs of sweat socks he was wearing. A shopping bag full of varied t-shirts and caps was found in the couple's possession. Officers learned that the pair stopped every 2 to 3, 4 blocks as they walked, and they changed shirts and caps. Their run was about 7 weeks, and they had exhausted themselves and their resources. They were tired and they were just trying to return back to where they knew. A week after their arrest, more than 50 law enforcement officials from 6 jurisdictions met to plan their strategy for prosecuting Coleman and Brown. They issued a search warrant for Alton grandmother's house, the Voodoo Queen, and she placed a spell on them and the officers upon their arrival. I'm not really sure what part this plays in the case, but I just thought that was so interesting that the police were stunned by it. Taking the death penalty for Coleman and Brown, Michigan was quickly ruled out because it did not employ capital punishment. It was decided to give Ohio the first attempt at sentencing. U.S. attorneys thought that they would be the most quick and the most likely in the swiftest imposition of the death penalty against Alton Coleman and Debra Brown. Coleman defended himself. He believed he needed to speak directly to the judge and the jury, as he believed he could convince them that he was incapable of doing such things and committing such crimes, and he would never in his life do that. He was trying to tell them folks it wasn't him, okay? He did not plead guilty, forcing a 9-year-old survivor to stand trial and be involved with reliving this again. I can't imagine a 9-year-old having to relive such a traumatic thing, let alone living it in the first place. So to me, this speaks volume for his need for control and his lack of care. This kind of reminds me of that one man that was defending himself in court, and he was like, "If you think I'm here to play with you, God damn it, I'm not.
If you think I'm here to play around with y'all, God damn it, I'm not."
All right, Mr. O'Neill, please.
Two, obviously in common, are very unserious men, but hey, maybe that was the hill he was supposed to die on. I don't know. The state of Ohio convicted Coleman and Brown, finding them guilty of the rape and murder of Tony Story in Cincinnati and Marlene Walters in Norwood, but not for the murders of Virginia and Rochelle Temple in Toledo. Coleman got 4 death penalties and Brown was sentenced to death. Coleman's case was sent to the U.S. Supreme Court several times between 1985 and 2002, and of course, his numerous arguments that his conviction and death sentence were unconstitutional failed to sway the justices. However, Coleman's death sentence in relation to the Story killing was overturned in a separate proceeding. Despite this, Coleman's death sentence in relation to the Walters murder remained the same. In addition to the death sentences, Coleman and Brown were sentenced to 20 years in prison for transporting their kidnapped victim, Olin Carmichael Jr., across state lines. They also transported Donna across state lines, but I'm not sure if that was in their trial. On April 25th, 2002, the Ohio Supreme Court rejected a claim by Coleman's attorneys that the state's plan to accommodate for the large number of victims and survivors who wanted to view the execution would turn it into a spectator sport. So many victims and survivors of Coleman's crimes were allowed to witness the execution that prison officials had set up. It was a closed circuit viewing venue outside of the building. Okay, are y'all ready for this? So, for this man's last meal, this is what he had. This is what he had the jail people make for him. He had a well-done filet mignon smothered with mushrooms, fried chicken breast, a salad with French dressing, sweet potato pie topped with whipped cream, French fries, collard greens, onion rings, cornbread, broccoli with melted cheese, biscuits and gravy, and a cherry Coke. He should have just went to Luby's. Before his execution, he released a letter apologizing for what he had done. On April 26, reciting Psalms 23, Alton Coleman was executed by lethal injection in the death chamber at the Southern Ohio Correction Facility in Lucasville. Reginald Wilkinson, the director of the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction, said Coleman had not directly expressed remorse for the killings, but he had admitted to what he's done in his own complicated way, I guess you could say. Coleman had received 2 death sentences from Ohio, and one from Illinois, and then one from Indiana. And at the time of his execution, he was the only condemned person in the United States to have death sentences in 3 states. I mean, he was really all up and through the Midwest. Like, it's very unfortunate that he got to claim the amount of lives that he was able to before being caught. But, damn. 3 states is crazy. 4, 5. I done lost count. I gotta go back and count now. But he was doing too much. Brown, who was originally sentenced to be executed in Ohio for her parts in the crimes, had her death sentence commuted to life imprisonment by Governor Richard Celeste in 1991. In commuting Brown's sentence, Celeste cited that her low IQ scores ranging from 59 to 74 and her master-slave relationship with Coleman influenced her actions. Brown was one of 8 death row inmates to have her sentence commuted by Celeste, who was a loyal opponent of capital punishment, a week before he left the office. To be clear, Debra was known to everyone as a quiet, meek, timid person, so this was really like a shock to everybody that knew her. I mean, the lady had no history of violence, no criminal history whatsoever. It was clear she was emulating Alton's behavior. She had never done this before, but eventually she enjoyed feeding off of his sinister energy. I truly think that at some point it definitely became something she enjoyed doing too, as she increased her involvement more and more and more throughout their spree. She had significant vulnerabilities that made her susceptible to his influence to become an active participant in rape, torture, and murder. Some argue that she was a victim of coercion, while others believe that she willingly embraced the violence as a part of their twisted bond. I believe that he would have done it without her, but not necessarily that she would have done this without him. Just imagine if she would have stayed married to her fiance instead. However, impressionable people take the form of whoever they're influenced by. So really, by that logic, if another manipulative, murdering capable man crossed paths with her, then it's likely that she would have done the same thing. Despite her non-violent history, before the spree, Brown was initially unremorseful for her acts. During the sentencing phase of the Ohio trial, she sent a note to the judge which read, I killed the bitch and I don't give a damn. I had fun out of it. She was also given a death sentence for the murder of Tamika Turks in Indiana. However, that sentence was ultimately commuted to 140 years in prison in 2018. Brown is currently serving her sentence without the possibility of parole at the Dayton Correctional Institution in Dayton, Ohio. She finally expressed remorse for her crimes when she apologized to the victims' families in a video in 2005, but she was recently described as a nasty, mean individual that took advantage of people. Together, the couple had been referred to as the Black Bonnie and Clyde of the Midwest. The story is a series of unfortunate events leading to the loss of multiple lives, as it exemplifies the deadly power of toxic relationships and influence. Brown's decision to abandon her fiancé and family for Alton Coleman sealed her fate, turning her from just an ordinary woman into a notorious serial killer accomplice lady woman, I guess. And she probably left her family thinking the grass would be greener on the other side and ended up living in hell on earth. She faced extreme intellectual disability, but I urge you to move with caution in your own life and relationships. We all desire excitement or believe that a fresh start would just solve all of our problems. But it's important to do a risk assessment, basically meaning to weigh all of the possible outcomes, good or bad, to vet people's true intentions. This may take time, but we ain't got nothing but time. You hear me? People cannot fake for that long. And most importantly, not ignoring red flags. If your moral compass is not aligned, you should not be with this person. Your partner is one of the most important people in your life. They influence your future, they help shape your mindset, and they affect your reputation and your opportunities. They play a major role in setting the standard for your life deeper into your relationship. Have you ever chose the wrong partner? Lord knows I have. And no, it didn't lead into a killing spree, but you can definitely see a shift into the version of who you are. And your loved ones may see it too. They may recognize it. So just reflect on what your life was like before, during, and after. And I mean, really, really, really think. Dig in that memory bank. How did you view yourself? How did you view the world? How did you view other people? Were you filtered or were you yourself? If you're no longer with this person, what did you learn or notice looking back that you can take with you in life and moving forward? You ain't got to share it, but these things are definitely important to digest and internalize so we don't get taken advantage of. The right partner can uplift, support, and inspire, while the wrong one can lead to heartbreak, destruction, or even danger. I've only scratched the surface here, but hopefully this will incite detection into mental health and violence prevention. Okay, Questers, thank you for tuning into my very first podcast. I got what you're looking for. Can't wait to see you next time. Thank you. Bye.